Alright, so really getting to some cool stuff on this video. I decided I want to separate the control surfaces because, I don't know, they always look better than just being printed on, or in my case, when I'm going to paint things, just making panel lines or something. So decided to separate them. And as I recall when I made the wings, there's actually some wood in there that might actually help me, right basically at the hinge line of the ailerons. So I decided to go ahead and cut these off. And I just very carefully, with a uber sharp blade, cutting straight down and cutting through all the layers and just taking my time. Um, the ends cut pretty easy. The long hinge part, the actual, the hinge line, work really well, but there is a rib in there that you got to be careful with. But if you just keep taking your time and just kind of plowing through there, light pressure, um, and uh, and again just kind of straight down, you'll separate them. And so I ended up doing this on both ailerons, and I'm going to do it on the tails as well because I want them to. They're not necessarily. I think the tail I'll probably put down a little bit like the elevators, but I'm not necessarily going to position them, pose them in a different way. It's just that it looks so much better to backfill with balsa and make a nice hinge line and then put them on separate, just like they really should be. They just look much more realistic when they're actually separate pieces. So pull those puppies off, and they come off with a fair amount of ease. And see, there's that piece of wood in there. So those ailerons are, 3/4 of the way there of being ready to go. What I'll do is put a little bit extra wood on them and sand them, round them. I'll put some I'll kind of dish out a little hinge line portion on the wings to make the ailerons fit in there, and I think it'll look just fine. Then I started working on les tails, and this is the rudder and the fin, and so I cut these little pieces here, which are little darts to allow this to curl around and fold around the back of the fuselage, and these just take a little while to cut, but I want to show you cutting them, just kind of getting things started. And this is all just being done sort of freehand. The hardest part is when it's light blue, you can see everything. You can see the lines. But when you hit the dark green and the black green color, you got to be careful because, again, the paint or the ink is so far out of the lines, it's really hard to tell where the lines are. I had a hard time with the stabilizers and the elevators cutting them off, actually. But anyway, cutting these pieces here because those are going to be little tabs to make sure that you make a little rounded part on the tail cone area back there. And get these puppies all cut apart, and you end up with a whole tail section. And here I'm scoring the pieces that are going to be folded over. That piece actually is nice and important because it gives the trailing edge a very fine edge, but it also gives it a little bit of structure when you fold it back on there. Because when you just put them together flat, they don't look right. When you got that little triangular piece essentially in there, they look much better. So I'm folding these back, and the little tongues down there will end up making the round portion. And here I put a little rounded little dealie that I found. My wife gave me. I forget where she got it from. But I'm using that to score things, and I'm use it to do some rounded of leading edges of various surfaces. And I just kind of do this carefully because you don't want to make a crimp, and you want to make sure it's even. And so I'm just really checking to make sure it's going to be even, and the thing folds over and everything lines up nice. I'm still continuously amazed at this model, and whoever designed it deserves a medal because it's going together nice. Now the bottom section, this tail cone, I take my back of my brush and I roll it, as you can see on my fingers or my hand somewhere, because I'm trying to make that be a curve, because that's going to fit over the back section, the rear section of the fuselage, which we'll show you in a second. The fit is really neat. And had I actually built it correctly and it wasn't crooked in the back, everything lined up really, really well. I had to do a little finagling around here. When I fill it and sand things, it'll all look good, but anything that isn't quite right again, isn't necessarily the kit's fault, because I did have problems getting a straight rear end. But you can see this is going to end up fitting over there and slide right in like that and down, and it's going to fit really nice. And you can see there's a slot there for the stabilizer. It's really neat. So here's stabilizer, cut them out, and I fold them over again just to sort of make them hint into where they're supposed to go. So I line up the trailing edges and then sort of very carefully give them a little pressure to give them a natural fold on the front end. See that? I'm not pushing down hard. I'm just kind of making them so that's the beginning, because I don't want to, again, make a crimp. And then when I get them a little bit better, then I'll put in something more solid and I'll give it more of a squeeze. As long as I'm around in there, you won't do too much damage to the leading edge. You just don't want to have it look like someone went by and kicked it with their foot down the leading edge. But anyway, those are the elevators and the stabilizers, and then there's the old tail. And what I did here is glue those pieces together. I glued those together first, and then later on I glued the trailing edge together. So these have been formed again, so there's a roundness to it, which is important, and because you can see where it fits around the rear of the fuselage. And put a little glue on each of these tabs, and then put some glue along. Oh wait, I didn't do that yet, that's right. This was just to get this bottom part in, and this just takes a little bit of care, but it fits really, really well. It's neat because it's curved like you see, but when you put them all together and you actually line things up and squeeze them together, you can see when they fit together, you end up making a really nice curved bottom part. And so I'm just making sure that the seam lines up in the middle, and then I'm just pulling them together, kind of pushing them together with my fingers, my finger and my thumb and forefinger, and then hitting them with tweezers so that you get the tabs to glue in there. Once you squeeze them like that, that glue sets up pretty dang fast. Remember, this is turbo tacky glue, and it's all I've ever used, mostly because it's what I find at Joann Fabrics or wherever. But it seems to work really well. I like to try the regular glue sometimes, see how that works. That isn't turbo. But here I'm just making sure that it's together, and then I'm going to kind of roll the bottom to make sure it's kind of roundish. In the end, when I add it to the back of the fuselage, it turns out I'm going to have to be doing a little bit of sanding anyway, so it won't matter. But again, just test fitting this, you can see where it's supposed to end up, and you can see how everything lines up. If I didn't have a crooked back end, look at that. Look at that lining up. When I put it on, I have to do it a little bit different. And it doesn't line up as beautifully. But if you had done the tail of the fuselage back correctly, without making it look like a bow and arrow, a bowed bow, like I did, man, this thing would have fit like a charm. So look at it, even on both sides, without even trying. So, praises should be heaped. Really nice. Not bad at all. So the next thing to do is to find, this little piece here. That little piece there, 10A, is the part that's going to go on the back of the butt end of the fuselage, and then that's going to form the hinge line between the rudder and the fin and give it some shape. And so that piece just needs to be cut out and put on to some wood, in my case. There it is right there. So I cut that out, and I'll glue it to some wood, cut it out, and we'll use it. So here it is, cut out roughly, and then I use my little glue stick to just get it onto the 1/16 balsa this is again, which gives me a little bit of strength. It is so cool to be building this kind of a model, because there is no such thing as a 1/32 scale Me-410 anywhere except here. And that just is really cool when you're done with it. And especially if it ends up looking good, people are like, how did you get that? And, well, it's a model. It's out there. You just got to build it out of paper. It's really cool. And then that is the part that's going to be for the stabilizer, which I glued up and cut out as well. So now, here is the butt end here. And you'll notice, if you look carefully, this is crooked. It is not the way it's supposed to be. It is poorly done by yours truly. If I put it the way it's supposed to be, I'd have a crooked rudder fin. So I'm gonna have to actually cant it one way. And here I'm just checking it, and I'm trying to see how it will look good because I got to make it line up with the wings. So, like my dad always said, if something's crooked, you just make sure everything else is crooked. You got to kind of cheat a little. So put a little bit of glue on that butt end, and this stuff again is nice because it gives you time to work. And then I line this up and put it on. By the way, I took the paper off of it because I don't want it to bow. Because if paper's on one side of the balsa, it will actually bow a little bit. I wanted this to be nice and vertical. But now I'm taking this, I'm shooting, looking down, eyeballing it, and I'm trying to get it straight. And if you look down there, you can see it's not straight in terms of where it is on the fuselage. It's quite a step. But it's straight that way, which is what I need. So it'll look straight in comparison to the wing. So even if the wing's crooked, everything's crooked, it will look okay because it's going to look straight. Then I cut off the tail, the rudder, and that worked perfectly well. Pulled it right off. And again, what I'll have to do is fill those in and make them work. But now that piece of balsa that sticks up there becomes right at the hinge, goes right at the hinge line. So you stick that in there, and then you'll glue this right along the hinge line and bring the leading edge down and touch it to the fuselage. And I'm just testing it, and it's going to look really good. The leading edge, by the way, where it hits the fuselage, is going to be a little fillet that we add on there, which we haven't done yet. And then there's the stabilizer that will fit in the slot. And you can see that there's a little lines here that show a center and also kind of where it's supposed to hit the two fuselage sides, the skins. Anyway, that's kind of how it's supposed to look. And I'm just sort of showing you. And then that will be the hinge line for the stabilizer. And that's kind of how it's going to go, at least with luck. So I put some glue along where the fin is going to attach to the fuselage, or touch the fuselage anyway. And also I'm going to end up hitting the back part of the fuselage there where that's going to roll around, all the way around. And then I hit the spar that's going to be the hinge line on both sides. I put a lot of glue on this, actually. I should have probably taken some of that off because it's pretty goopy. It worked out, but I should have probably been a little more delicate on that. But again, this has been test fitted 6,000 times, and I just slide it in like I've done. Slide the tail cone over like that, and then I spend the rest of the time just making sure that the piece of balsa is at the hinge line. So I'm just squeezing down, making sure that it's good, and then I sort of hit it around the fuselage cone piece where it's going to go. And I'm kind of pulling down to try to make sure that the leading edge is touching the top of the fuselage, and we'll slowly glue there. You have time to work this. You have time to play around. You spend a lot of time I've cut out of this video showing me doing boring things like eyeballing it, making sure it looks good, trying to make sure there's no bulges in it. See there, I'm eyeing it down the spine, trying to make sure it's good. And I had to push it over a little bit. I have to do a little squeezing here and there. But once she's together, it looks really good. It looks every bit as good as a injected molded plastic. Now that I'm in there, I'll put a piece of balsa wood when I'm ready, because that's where part of the rudder is going to go. So that'll be filled in and look good. And there is the rudder itself. And again, I'll pull that apart and put some balsa in there to make it the right thickness, and put a rounded piece up there where that balance piece is. But there it is. Looks good. Doesn't look too fat. Doesn't look like there's a lot of structure missing underneath it. It actually looks better than the wings. It looks pretty good. I like it. And I'm just trying to show you that it's relatively straight compared to the wings. Remember, this thing is not perfect. When you look at it really carefully, you'd go, but we're not going to look at it that carefully. Okay. So there it is. Looks pretty dang nice. I'm liking it. Now, I'm just getting ready to add the glue for putting in the stabilizer spar. So put a little bit there because it's really ingenious. It goes through that slot, and then it's going to go butt right up against the vertical piece that's the hinge line on the rudder. And then that'll glue, and that'll give it nice, nice and strong. And all you do is slide this and make sure you get it from the top. Put a T there, see? So that the top part is on the top, because it's supposed to be slanted, I guess, downward. And I put it in until there's a center line, and I just make sure the center line is in my center by eyeballing it. And then I stick it in there. And now I spend time again making sure it's perpendicular, making sure it's straight. And again, I've cut a lot of this because all you see is my arm and my fingers. Don't worry, it gets better. But really what you do is you spend multiple minutes while the glue is drying to make sure that it's going to be straight. Because if they're not straight, you're in trouble. There I'm pushing forward to make sure it glues to that vertical piece of the hinge line of the rudder, because that has to be good. And I really just spent a lot of time playing with this. And then once I got it pretty good, here I am kind of tweaking it. A lot of this went on, pushing down, looking at it from the front, looking from the back, and getting, the best fit I could. There's no measurements. This is all with the Mark 1 eyeball. Probably shouldn't be for those of you who are engineers, but it'll be good enough for the girls we date, as I say. Making sure, but you're careful. And once it's good, then I lock it in place with some super glue and a little zip kicker in there. Kind of make sure that, because I don't want this to move, of course. So I put a little blob of glue in there, and then I'm just kind of brushing it in place with a bamboo skewer. And then blast it with a little bit of zip kicker, and then she's locked. And now, really the only thing left to do is to put the actual skins on of the elevators, or the stabilizers, I'm sorry. And here it is, straight, perpendicular, and it looks good when I look at it from the front and the back. If the tails go on nice and follow that, well, it'll come out really good. So we're moving right along. So there it is. And again, if you'd done the whole back end correctly, all those lines would have matched up in that stabilizer area back there. They don't on mine, but that's because of me. But again, when I'm all done with it, it's really going to look slick. It's going to look great. Pretty pleased. So same routine. I decided to cut the elevators off, and these have a little balancer piece on it as well. And I just started with that little piece just so it's correct. You can see the ends are a little puckered, the tip. And what I tried to do, which I didn't show, was I tried to put some tissue paper in there to try to fill them out so that they wouldn't be, so that they wouldn't pucker, so that they would actually have some form to them. And I never tried that before, and turns out that was not a good idea. People do it, but I didn't do it right, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of backfill on that. It'll be okay. It'll work fine. But anyway, take off the elevators, and again, same thing. It looks skinny, but I'll fill those out nice. There's the tissue. I ended up pulling it out because it just looked bad, and I couldn't get the spar in. So I am testing, making sure the spar, it fits on there, and making sure that the elevator or the stabilizer is going to be have the correct incidence, all that sort of stuff. So you add a little glue along the spar, top and bottom, and this time I was more careful. I put it on like there's no tomorrow, but then I take a lot of it off with my finger just to clean it up a little bit. And again, what I'm trying to avoid is having some glue, edgy looking weird stuff underneath the paper, which is the bane of my existence. And now, I'm trying to see if do I have to cut that back part off. I didn't. On the other side, I had to. This side looked pretty good. So again, I add glue where I think it's going to touch the side of the fuselage. Extra glue in this case doesn't matter because it's not a hard thing to just wipe off the excess. And I don't know if there's fillets on these or not. But if there aren't fillets, these are still going to look okay. I'll have a smear of probably primer and putty on them anyway. But I slide these puppies in, push them into place, and again, make sure that that's the balsa is lined up along or close to the hinge line. And then I spend some time getting rid of some excess glue, sklooge, and again, making sure it's, like I said, the angle of incidence is right. In this case, it was a little off, so I was kind of adjusting it. The tail cone part is going to be adjusted later. I'm going to have to sort of play with those, just like the tail end on the wing fillets. But lo and behold, I'm checking it, and dang if it doesn't look like the tail end of an Me-410. And this is where the elevators will go on. They will look so much cooler being separated, so much more realistic. Um, Plus, separated like that, I can turn them, make them look more like fabric in a little bit. We'll play around with some tricks to make them look like they're fabric covered. Um, anyway, I'm just kind of playing around. Those will all be fixed when it's time, and I'll fix that tip as well. But there she blows. An actual Me-410 taking shape.